I like to read about quantum theory, relativity, string theory. That's, I can't do the math by any stretch, but I love the ideas and the concepts. And one of the things that I'm reading about in there is something called quantum jitter. And it's dramatic, unbelievable changes, turns and twists and everything. And our politics has become almost akin to quantum jitter rather than the slower Newtonian physics of a smooth universe with the Earth circling the sun is rotating within the galaxy, the floating over the stars. But somehow we got to get rid of the quantum jitter. And the other thing that I would hope to do is to find some way to reach a fundamental agreement on what the problems are before we go carry off into what the solution is for a perceived problem. I believe one of the reasons we have so much great dissensions that I call it the Great Divide is we can't even agree on what the problem is, and we start arguing about solutions without agreeing on the fundamental problem. I'm not trying to lecture you. That's a deep question, but those are some of the things that I at least think about trying to do.
Just a much better answer than I would have given. Thank you. So I'm looking forward to this alternative to the critical thinking forum. Just a place where people can get together, share their thoughts on topics, and not get shut down. It's my critique of that room is that the people that have the least insight are given the most talk time. There's no chat to push back on. There's no ability to rebuttal the nonsense that's said in those rooms. There was a person yesterday that made the comment that ICE agents are paid a commission for each person that they deport. And I fact checked that, and that's a lie. And it's interesting the things that Gary, as a journalist, chooses to push back on, and the things that he just allows to go on. So I'm hoping that people with a true journalistic spirit, people like El Normo that have worked as a journalist in the past, will attend these rooms in the rational discussion group, where we will have rational discussions, and we will allow different opinions, and we will fact check, and we will allow for real discussion to take place.
Well, I'm a Gary fan, and you know I'm a fan of you too, but I've heard Gary fact check people. He's sometimes distracted. Sometimes he'll come back to the next episode and say, I need to talk about this. And I think he went through a really bad time one day where his moderators didn't know what to do and the room was taken over. And he came up with the format that he has now that is hard because you have to wait to speak. It's hard to get to speak again. But I think he does try to have different viewpoints, and he does push back sometimes, and it is a little weird what triggers him. But I think he tries really hard.
I agree, and I'm actually a bit surprised by what I know. It's not an echo chamber, if that's what you're implying. I mean, so half his mods are conservative.
Are you referring to, let's see, his mods are Scott Jones, who's not a conservative. You have Marshall, who I have a lot of respect for, but he's probably is smack dab in the middle of the political spectrum as you can get from being a Republican. And so, who would you say is the conservative of the
Marshall and that guy Allen, right? I don't know how that was.
There's Steve too.
interrupt an opinion unless unless it's like a fact checking issue perhaps. He rarely interrupts someone's share, whether they be on the left or the right. I think my biggest criticism for Gary's room is just he just needs to be. He lets people pontificate way too long, not letting it both sides of the aisle. Whether it's
You shouldn't talk about mom stuff without him being able to defend himself.
I will say I'm almost ready to leave that room with Scott because Scott is word salad at there.
yeah.
And he's, kissing up to Gary, and they seem to both like it. And I have a little tolerance for that now.
Can we agree that, Scott sometimes can add interesting insights to religion conversations? His impersonation of Donald Trump is
Is
the
the worst ever.
worst impersonation of Donald Trump. On an app where people are really good at impersonating him,
Like messenger, but maybe seems very similar to the other chat hearings. I think they were really just his codes.
now here's a novel idea. I'm just going to utilize the tools that this app has provided so people can communicate with each other. They added the chat feature here 4 years ago. It's amazing.
Moderators, I would just like to quickly quote from the First Amendment of the Constitution where it says, prohibiting free exercise, abridging freedom of speech or press, or right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Do you think that, Gary Baumgartner's room doesn't necessarily reflect the First Amendment?
I don't think the First Amendment comes into play here. The First Amendment is the government can't restrict it, but as a moderator, you can do whatever you want. The question is the way that he restricts speech in terms of not allowing the chat and not allowing people to provide a pushback on people's comments. He doesn't allow for that. So basically, when people can make up lies and state them, they just get to stay. And there's people that are listening down below that might think it's true. In fact, the guy that said that the ICE agents were getting paid for every person they deport, there was a second person that said, I wanted to mention that too. And it's like, oh, so you want to repeat the lie. And so now it's been said twice, and Gary's still not pushing back on it. And so, look, I like Gary. I do. I actually think that when Gary first got on this app, it was a breath of fresh air. I will even say that I've enjoyed his spaces over the years, and I really appreciate the consistency. I think what's happened, though, is he's allowed his personal opinions about Donald Trump to ruin what could be a good space and a good conversation. He's launching by.
I think two examples that have occurred recently. One was yesterday, where yet again we were going to have a topic, tariffs, go into a ban. And I posted in the chat, I wasn't going to engage in that discussion, but I posted in the portion of it, but I engaged in the chat. And I said, it's too soon to tell. Why don't we wait a while and see, and then argue about it? And he really took exception to that. And he claimed that there was no argument, that it was all a peaceful exchange of ideas. Well, it was for that room yesterday, because everybody in that room yesterday, the only argument was how they could greater to name Trump in any concept of terrorism. There was nobody in that room, and I'm not a fan of terrorists, but there's nobody in that room that I heard, and I left sometime after 5. I didn't wait for the very end. But there was no argument because that room yesterday was an echo chamber. Everybody that wants to oppose terrorists joined the room, and the only differential was who could more strongly oppose terrorists and who could more strongly demand the delusional Trump for ever even thinking of it in the first place. That one was the straw that broke my camel's back, and I wrote a 2-page email private
critique of the room, but it was controversial. And I shared early, without any particular strong views, went to the audience, and over the course of the rest of the room, the rhetoric was again bordering on Trump derangement syndrome. I don't like that. I agree with Gary. That's a disease. I don't like that, but I haven't figured out the best acronym for it. But then I came back up on the stage, and because of the nature of the rhetoric that I heard, and I was I think I was the last one to speak, and I didn't try to counter the outrageous comments that were made. I just advised that there would be caution and careful analysis, blah, blah, blah. And Gary's response to me was, "Oh, you're in favor of polluted rivers in Cleveland, right?" And I said, "Bullshit," and left the room. That's that's the way that room has been trending for some time. And I don't have any personal intention of being the ramrod to counter room Gary. I'm too old. I don't have the skills. Hell, I don't even know how to pick a moderator or move people up and down from the stage. My geek skills are terrible. But I am looking, I just told Roger, I said, where in the hell can we find some more rational discussion? And all of a sudden, we now have a room. Again, I want to participate in it, and I want to contribute to it, and I want to do it in a balanced, reasonable manner without anybody dominating. But I'm not sure that I have the temperament and the personal computer skills to be able to be the guy in charge. Somebody else really needs to skipper that ship, and I'll be a loyal junior officer. Would be my. All right, you twisted my arm. I'll do it.
There you go, Mojo. And well, to that point though, of the balanced room and Anson's point about having a well-moderated, balanced discussion. So far, I haven't heard anyone who might represent the left as much might be moderator in that room, or is that just even too brazen of a thought to even consider?
I'll tell you somebody who has calmed down a hell of a lot since the election, and boy did how about Meryl? Man, I would welcome the opportunity to co-moderate a room with Meryl, because I mean she's left, but I would welcome the opportunity to do that. I don't know whether she touches with a 10-foot pole, but I agree with you. Steve and I are only Mojo and Roger are the only moderators up there. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, this is another crazy writing room. I don't want to have anything to do with it."
She and Howard have moderated rooms, and they've done a great job.
Yeah.
I guess Meryl can be wordy, but when she's out of Gary's room, and they go back a long time, but there's an unusual amount of Meryl hate. I don't know how to say it on this app. I'm always shocked by it. But I would love to have her up there and see how it works.
And I agree with Howard. I've always been impressed with Howard. I'm looking for balance. I'm not looking for, I want to participate in a well-balanced room where people are allowed to speak and have an exchange of conversation, not just you speak for 2 or 3 minutes and you slam back to the audience, and all you have left is you can flash mojos. That drives me nuts. I like a conversation.
You know what? You guys can laugh at me. You can say it doesn't work. You can say the audio is terrible. But we do that every night on Spaces with our own topic, and we moderate it well. We people popcorn speak. We control the room and bring up new people, kick out the trolls, and it can work over there. And you only have 12 people speaking. So
what room is that?
That's our Tesla room on Spaces, X Spaces, almost every night.
That's on X, not on what? No, I don't even know. know how to get on the X. That's how old I am.
Same here, Anthony. No, thank you. No, well, it's not the best stable format, but first of all, you only have 12 people that can talk, and you can rotate them up and down. And it's kind of interesting because the whole world is listening. But just like everything else, a well-moderated room can flourish.
Absolutely. And I will say, I think that you guys are right about we need the balance. We need to have people that feel very passionate about their viewpoints. I want to hear from somebody that thinks that $37 trillion worth of debt is a terrible idea. And then I want to hear from the person that thinks that $37 trillion worth of debt is not only not a bad idea, but maybe we should add to it. I want to hear those different viewpoints. And so that's what I'm here for, is to make sure that we hear both views.
And how are you going to do that, Mojo, when you only have right, moderated conservatives?
Listen, anyone that knows me knows that I welcome people. And by the way, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I don't think that you're going to find anybody on this app that has more consistently ran rooms that were critical of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies over the time that I've been on this app. Honestly, I don't think there's a single person in the lefty rooms that have done that. I'm certainly not MAGA. I'm not even a Republican. I'm now post-partisan. I used to be a libertarian. I think that I stand in different camp. Some Republicans do stand with me, and because I'm a capitalist at the end of the day, and so I stand against these newfangled MAGA Republicans that are anti-capitalism. They're economic interventionists. And my question is if economic interventionists are to the left of you and economic interventionists are to the right of you, why not stand somewhere else?
Right, and I agree. I will agree that you have been. You are one of the more fair from the right. I would put JD in the same category. He slams Trump quite a bit. I respect that. He's a great moderator. But again, maybe I'm not wording the question correctly. I'm not saying that you as a moderator are not fair. I'm saying, like Anson agreed with me earlier, when someone joins the room, they look at all the green beans, and albeit as fair as you are, everyone with the green bean has a reputation or is at least known for their views as being right and or conservative leaning.
So this is what
that is not a well-balanced room.
Then this is what I'll do. I will solo mod. I will flex the solo mod, and I will invite everyone. We will not. Look, if we could get balance, if we get real balance, if you got, if somebody from, a very vocal member of the left wanted to, let's say if Aaron wanted to show up and to talk about the things that he cares about. He's been, for 4 years, he's got this talk point about the average American does not have $1,000 for a single emergency. If he wants to come and say that, he's welcome to. And if somebody else wants to push back, that's great. What I'm going to do, though, I will tell you, in this particular space, it's going to be a lot less about my opinion, because I think the error that I've witnessed with Gary is injecting his viewpoint, which he's biased. We're all biased, but I want to curate a stage where if Anson presents an idea and somebody presents a counter idea, I would like, rather than going to the next speaker that wants to change the subject, I'd rather them go back and forth a little bit and maybe even put a poll in the room of see how it's tracking, that sort of thing.
Boy, that is superb. But Moose is right. We've got to get people from the left, at least reasonable people. I mean, if we get trolls from the left, and by the way, I don't mind being a co-moderator with you, Roger, but I don't need to do that either as long as, but I mean, if it's got to be a balanced room, we've got to get a balance, a divergence of opinions. But we also have to be damn sure that we are arguing about a problem that we mutually agree is a problem, rather than we don't even have a problem with 20 million people residing in our country that are doing so without the permission of the government. Some people don't even think that's a problem. Well, if you don't think that's a problem, then trying to find a solution to it is going to be counterproductive, if you get my gist.
I'm going to say one thing, Anson. I'll be real quick. Even if you don't want to moderate, you should have a moderator badge because you can interject more quickly and guide the conversation. And believe it or not, if you can run a submarine, which I think you did very well, and you're a graduate of War College, you can learn the buttons for moderation.
I honestly, this would be like a wardroom discussion on whether we should go right, left, or stay where we are with the whole wardroom, even though I'm the skipper, and will make the ultimate decision. I won't be the skipper of the room. I won't make the ultimate decision, but I certainly know how to stimulate conversations.
Yeah.
As long as we stay on topic and agree, again, I can't, sometimes I have a hard time trying to figure out what the problem is that we're arguing about.
Well, we'll give you a nuclear button too.
Well, back in the day, one of my nicknames was Reactor Red. And I did have red hair, I didn't have gray hair. But I will absolutely, under Roger's guidance and mentorship, I will do my best not to be Reactor Red in that room.
It'll be a good one. I think it'll be good. I do think the framing of the conversation is important, though. And I like the idea of, do we agree that it's a problem? Because I think that we can all agree. I think most rational human beings can agree that $37 trillion worth of debt is a bad idea. And then it comes down to, well, what's the solution? And some people might argue that you just need to print more money. And then others would argue that, no, that's probably a bad idea. Maybe that's how we got to this point.
But what does Moose say?
Moose, you're a man of the left. Why don't you come and represent the left?
I thought Moose.
As long as you're not directly on any contracts or NDAs, repeating yourself all the time.
No, Moose, you just have to show up and speak your truth, your lived experience.
Well, same thing happens.
I have a suggestion for that kind of room, if I may.
Oh, we'd love to hear it. We're open to even having women speak on these stages. Go ahead, Kristen.
So, speakers have a minimum of 30 seconds to make their point. And there's a moment of pause, and then the next person can have 30 seconds to make their point.
30 seconds I don't want wordy, but 30 seconds is not enough moments.
Is it about what?
I agree with where you're going, so people aren't going on for 5 minutes. I believe a minute might be a better.
You can decide on how long 30 seconds is.
I speak for a living in a group
Yeah.
times. Okay, I know how long it is.
Yeah.
What if I give a visual cue? You guys okay with a visual cue? This is the one that I give.
For what?
To let people know that
To round it up, he has somebody that he doesn't get from somebody pointing at his watch. I like it.
Well, but what I'm saying is, if you, to come in for, I have to try very hard in order to be concise, and I think that it would be great, it would behoove everybody if they tried to as well.
Shakespeare says, perfect. Shakespeare says that brevity and control of wit.
Well, some people don't care about being witty. That's the problem.
Some people just like to hear their own voice. I agree.
Good Lord, they just like get up there and let me tell you about all these things. And then here, you guys have never even heard about these things because you guys have never even heard the news in the past 6 months.
Does that mean Jane Rosenzweig can't come on?
To your point, Mocha, I think there's I believe the quote is, say much with few words. Excuse me. Don't say little with few words. Stand by.
Well, better to remain silent.
Impressive. Better, like, you want to hire me to speak at your orientation?
Better,
It's surprising.
better to remain silent and thoughtful than open your mouth and remove all doubt. Well, let me
Much with you. Thank you.
Let me offer a counter perspective to Kristen's suggestion. John asked, I think it was John, asked me a question that was a tough question. And I prompted to him, I don't remember what I was struggling to come up with an answer. Pretty hard. But I hope I was making
progress in articulating and holding the attention of the room. So as long as somebody is doing that, then a reasonable amount of time, 2, 3 minutes, something, give them I don't want them to turn this into, you only, like Twitter or whatever it was, where you could only use 140 words. If we go back to that, then the ability to have an interesting conversation. I mean, how would you like to have a conversation where you can only speak for 30 minutes, 30 seconds in a conversation? I mean, we need to stimulate conversations that are meaningful, offer a divergence of views, are rational, and are polite and respectful.
I concur. However, I have to rebuttal because as a female, I'm often cut off in these rooms. I notice that other women are cut off as well. They do have a tendency of being as possible in addition to all the other people. I would say that Monica and Issa are excellent at not being moved by other people giving kind of distortions or trying to interrupt them and other things during other manipulations during a conversation or something like that. But it's just one of those things that some people don't mind interrupting. Some people don't mind they think that taking a moment to think means interrupting. And, if you want to go back to the whole rules of what okay, well, here I am, and I land my plane, and so you know when to come in. We go back to that. That's pretty civil, but it's also very formal, and I do like to hear the impassioned responses. It's pretty cool. But it is like, without totally being a manners Nazi, for lack of a better word, it would be really great to somehow kind of encourage people to hear each other out. And perhaps timing maybe that perhaps not.
So, Kristen, I appreciate the
Yes, darling.
I appreciate the comments.
I know.
I would propose that we go back to the original format that was respectful for the vision impaired that were on the app. And at the end of our submission, we would say, my name is Mojo and I am complete. And then once you say you're complete, then you're done.
I like that. I like what Kristen said. Sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
Quick background here. I don't know, just enough.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, so I have to go, but I like that. What Kristen shared, and I agree with you, Mojo. Going back to season 1, And further, I would say, since this is a new house, I think it would behoove us to go over some basic house cleaning rules, what will and will not be tolerated.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is good. Let me read the rules to the current house that we're in.
Yeah. But see me later. I'm happy to do this as an experiment and mod with you. Anyone who's any of my lefty friends who sees me modding and thinks I go to the dark side, well, they can go roller skate and juggle dynamite.
Awesome. Well, we're going to start that room in less than 30 minutes. If you can join, please do. It'll start at 2 o'clock Pacific time, 5 o'clock Eastern.
Oh, my, you're a little with Abby. Are you the same? I like your style, and if we need women up there, I really love to participate in those kind of conversations with you.
I like the way you frame that as if. Let me read you guys the rules of this particular house, and then we can discuss whether or not we should add anything to the other house. So for this house that we're in now, rule number 1 is no threats of violence. Number 2, no doxing. Number 3, stay on topic. Number 4, keep your shares brief. Number 5, do not interrupt speakers, especially mods. Number 6, mods may interject when appropriate. Number 7, the N-word is forbidden on stage and in chat. Number 8, do not spam the chat. Number 9, do not bring drama here from other rooms. Number 10, English. We'll talk about it. The addition, I'll be honest, I've heard that word 3 times since I've been on this app. And by the way, it's always in the same space. It's where you find what they refer to as conservatives, but they're actually not. You know that conservative wing of Clubhouse that started with guys like Alex New York, and it attracts like people like the Geos of the world. Those are the spaces where I hear the K word. I've heard it about 3 times since I've been on. When somebody breaks the rule, I have no idea what the K word is. That's how old I am about it. It's a slur for Jewish people. Oh, got it. 4-letter. Got it. Yep. It's a naughty word, and point taken, Abby. I will update it. Thank you. And like the S word, it's 4-letter for Hispanics. Yeah, but I'm kind of attached to that
shout out. Never do.
No, go for it. Go for it. Go for
To
it.
be old school.
Tonight we're letting women speak tonight. Go ahead.
Actually, you're really good at fighting for women to speak. I will give you credit for that. Absolutely. I really appreciate that too. And also for being a champion for people being really disrespectful. So I appreciate that. I love the back channel. It's so funny because I love words and I love hearing people being witty, especially like
I love your back channel too.
yeah, and so Darren is hilarious and his wit, and I'm so sorry. I have to give him a huge shout out because he's always so funny with his, just talking about like whatever is going on in the room, and is totally dead on with a lot of the comments and everything. It is just hilarious, and Christy is too, and calling out like what is going on, and it's really really funny. However, I kind of hate to lose that, but there is something about that, just especially if it's in a live room and with such incredible minds being able to exchange ideas. It'd be really cool to hear people talking without the back channel. Because I think it's not quite disruptive. It's just it broadens the focus, and it would be neat to see if that focus. But I know, and then Christine throws tomatoes at me. All right, you can shut it down. The idea if you don't want it, but hey, Serenity, I didn't ask your opinion.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Dave over here. Are you the guy from Southern California that frequently you keep changing your PTRs? Or are you the guy from Southern California that is has strong objections to Trump all the time? And I don't care if that's it.
I think you're thinking of David Garcia.
That's a different David answer.
Got it. Okay. All right.
I'm in the Pacific Northwest, the north left coast.
All right. Got it.
So, can I ask a question? What are you thinking about the room title for your first room and rational discussion group in the next 15 minutes?
I'm going to wait to see what Gary does, and then I'm just going to use a similar title.
So,
What's his title?
It's about Trump using the military to go as far as countries to let them drug cartels using actual military force.
Is this already advertised in his?
Gary's title is "Should U.S. Troops Be Used to Fight Cartels?" That's the title of the room tonight.
All right. Well, we're gonna give people choices here. Which room they want to go to? Please.
so when
So I have a question. Sorry. I have moose blocked. This usually means it's from.
No, so let me say. So Moose is left of center. Moose is a rational guy. I disagree with him on a lot of things. But no, he's not a radical to anything. Now, what you may have heard him say is he might share opinions around I don't know, being critical of Netanyahu or something like that. That might be something I can imagine that he might have, decided that he didn't like him over.
No, I don't know. That wouldn't be enough for me to block him. I probably heard him say genocide or something like this.
Maybe, but sometimes people get caught up in the wordplay of somebody else says it, so then they just repeat it. I would imagine that if you were to corner him and ask him what he thinks is happening, it would be surprising to me if he referred it as genocide.
Okay, thank you.
Another language for a second, you want anybody else be with you? Anybody else?
English on it.
All right. They tend to have a problem with it, and you know my dad, and he and I get along, and so I will tell you, I'll use my phone that.
I have to ask. I mean this with utmost respect. So this new room is just going to mimic his topics. That's our sole purpose. I don't think we should.
I think that's a good starting point because it basically it's like a little wink and a nod of like, hey, we're not really crazy about what you were doing, so we're doing this thing. But I think it would get boring real fast to do that. So we also don't want to be limited to what he's talking about. But I think for the first couple, I think it's a good idea to do that. It's just a little shot across the bow in a friendly way. By the way, I actually like Gary, so I'm just critical of the way that the rooms have evolved lately.
I'm disappointed. I actually thought I had the temerity and ego to think that Mojo had created a house just to maximize my skill set of facilitating civil discourse. And now I've learned it's just a Gary echo. So sad.
Can I just say that is the voice of an angel. Thanks for showing up, Monica.
You're welcome. He's here to me.
So wait, Monica, you're
As for room topics, one that's passed my mind is we've been having this 45-minute discussion, and it's right in my wheelhouse. Are we closer? Do you believe that we're closer to nuclear war than ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis? Yeah, but I still think we're a ways away. Yeah, I agree, but that's of course, I'm not just focused on military stuff, but those are the kinds of broad topics. Is it a problem? And if so, what are we going to do about it?
well. Do you want to talk about it right now, or you want to wait till the round?
No. I'm just suggesting that there are interesting topics that we don't have to just follow Gary's lead and let him dictate the topics. After we can do that, I agree, Mojo or Roger. Let's start off that way, but let's don't in any way allow that to restrict ourselves.
So when you say that this room, one of the rules is stay on topic, I mean, to me, the topic is how to have civil conversations. And so it does seem to me like people are actually staying on topic at this very moment. But I'm wondering, will the Rational Discussion Group also demand that people stay on topic? Because to me, I've heard you say before, Mojo, John has listened to all the bullshit you guys just spewed. You can't listen to him for 30 seconds, 60 seconds. So I'm just asking if, how are you determining what's topical? Because if I think it's off topic and then I, want to read, let's say, Bible flashcards, to me, that might be more topical than what the people have been talking about for the past, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, etc.
The goal is conversation. I think that's the goal. The conversation. On the topic. A conversation on the topic at hand.
Specifically, what he's asking you is, irregardless of the fact that he is asking if he can derail conversations with impunity. That's what I heard anyway.
No, that's not true. I don't want to derail conversations, but I want intelligence. And if I think that we just listen to a bunch of garbled, Elon Musk calls politics, there's a lot of friction or like wire disruption. I can't remember the term he uses. I'm just saying that it's up to the moderator to truly guide the conversation. And a lot of people, it becomes this circular flow conversation between one or two people that can't break in. It's like, we need strong leadership in the moderator. That's all I'm saying.
One of my other reputations during my time in service, well, actually, my whole professional career, was I had a pretty good bullshit detector.
Right. John, can I ask you a frank question?
You talking to me?
No, I'm talking to John. Sorry, Ann.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was wondering, so is this the saying,
annual basis.
Are you asking me a question about ask the word?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there something wrong with the way I'm saying ask?
I don't know, is there? Because I wonder if you're being inflammatory or if you're wanting to have a civil conversation.
Well, ask. You're asking me if the way I'm saying ask is intentional, but that doesn't violate one of the rules of the house. No, it doesn't. Is that a question? Can I ask you that question?
It doesn't, but I'm wondering if you're trying to make friends or you're trying to make a statement.
I'm trying to call attention to words, and so when people ask me about asking questions, I ask them what they think ask means when I say it. But I find it interesting that people always want to ask me why I'm using the word ask as opposed to the word ask. Can I ask you a question?
Anson, is your bullshit detector going off? Just checking.
Yes.
Well, can I ask you a question, Kristen?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'd like to ask you a question. What are the funded debt liabilities of the of the federal government, the United States of America, and what are the unfunded debt liabilities of the United States government?
Yeah, so again, are you wanting to have a civil conversation or are you trying to antagonize me with that kind of language?
No, I'm just asking you, how would you find out that information? What is the debt, the funded and the unfunded debt liabilities of the United States government?
Hey, John, did you get any rest last night?
I did. I actually went to sleep at a good hour, hit the gym yesterday, and I'm just really looking forward to having rational discussion group. Kristen, do you think you're going to be able to have a rational discussion in the rational discussion group?
When you woke up, you went to the gym?
No, not yet. I'm going to go in a little bit after I suntan.
Go to the gym and come back.
Okay, thank you very little, Tamak. Let me ask you. Go ahead, Hakima.
You in Illinois, correct?
Correct. I'm in Chicago, Illinois. No doxing now.
This is no threat, no violence, none of that, but let's sit down and have a beer. And I just want to have a conversation. I want to see what you're like. Like, do you act the same in public or?
Yeah, sure thing. Come meet me. I'll send you the link. You can come meet me at the Dock Restaurant Bar where the Lady Hawk, my sailboat, is at, and I will buy you a beer. Thanks for asking that question. I can't wait to meet you, Hakima.
Okay, let me know a good time, and I'll be there.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it this Sunday at noon. I'll put the address in the chat. See you Sunday at noon at the Dock. And they've got great Pilsners. They've got incredible imports. They got Polish beer. You are going to love the beer selection.
Don't wear a tight shirt.
Shirts off at the beach.
I just checked the clubhouse events, and oh my God, here we go. At the top of the list was the critical thinking forum, and right beneath it is the rational discussion group. That's gonna set off all kinds of shit.
You know what? Let's do this. This will be the only time we directly copy their topic. We will come up with our own ideas, but we have to do the little wink to them. I think this is only appropriate.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see how many people pop in and pop out to see what the hell's going on. This ought to be fun, at least for a day. Thanks, Roger.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna start in 7 minutes too. So, and the other thing is I had nothing scheduled, rehearsed, anything. I didn't know until a minute ago what the title was, but I do have some thoughts on the topic of that room, which is should U.S. troops fight drug cartels? to involve myself completely, but I will try to minimize and reduce the escalation if I can.
Yeah, I agree. This is kind of the thing. It seems simple, but it could be complicated sometimes. You know,
Yeah,
would you punch the guy in the face, or do you say, hey, he's up?
so here's an interesting thing. I did a police ride along once, and in this police ride along, there was they had pulled over a car that was suspected of a shooting at a wedding reception, and they pulled the suspects out of the car. I was allowed to get out of the car at that stop. They're pulling suspects that were suspected of a shooting. I was able to get out of the car and be in, I don't know if that was a safe place to be or not. But when I was on that same ride along and there was a domestic dispute, it was requested that I remain in the car because the domestic disputes are so dangerous and volatile that they didn't want the ride along to be present there. So I had to stay in the car for that. Very interesting.
That makes sense.
Do you think?
The domestic situation could escalate with the shooting that you're already over. So they investigate, but they don't want you to walk into something you're investigating. Somebody go, they should get you fucked up.
Wait a minute, hold on. Mike is saying he's starting his room at 3:55 now. What time zone is that? Do you mean okay?
It's on East Coast time.
LS Love says I'll be leaving this room because John is a racist, unfunny a-hole. I don't think that's very fair, and I don't think that's within the spirit of the title of the room here.
Well, actually, if I can ask that person a question, if you think the word ask used by me indicates that I'm a racist, I would just merely point out that you're being fooled by a speaker using words intentionally to gaslight you. And part of, stoicism, enlightenment, deals with, in my opinion, how do we deal with people's communication? Because the brain automatically responds to obnoxious, people, and you will meet obnoxious people, dirty people, smelly people, loud people, all day, every day. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is.
Pause that thought. Monica, can you? I'm gonna go open that room. Can you post it so people can move over there? By the way, I don't know why Christy is riding the nuts of Gary so hard. There is nothing that Gary has ever done for Christy, ever. So, Monica, if you could go ahead and put that in the jumbotron above, that would be great. I'm gonna go open that room. Monica, can you do that? Are you listening?
She'd be right back out of here.
Okay. Serendipity, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go open it. Thank you.
Okay.
This is going to be exciting for people in the audience who may not be aware. Mojo, the positive vibration experience, is opening up his first room in Rational Discussion Group, where he will be parroting Gary Baumgarten's War on Drugs. Should we use Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon to attack international narco-terrorists? Very shortly. Oh, what's her face left? Oh, she's going to go get the link. And then she's going to pin the link at the top, and you're going to click through and engage in the new Rational Discussion Group.
I see you as you rock. I said I see you and you rock.
Hanson, how are you? Oh, look, we've got some guests that are showing up here. We got the world famous John Kitover. He's running for Congress, in case you guys didn't know. Let's see. Get some people invited. I'm going to invite some people to the room. We'll get started in just a minute. What we lack in professionalism of starting on time, we make up for with a heterodox conversation where we welcome polite let me bring some people to the stage. I want to bring some of my favorite people to the stage. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, they're all welcome. I think the important thing to recognize here is that if you're going to have a good conversation, you've got to welcome varying opinions. And what we have here is varying opinions. I'm going to moderate a couple of people that I think might sit on different sides of the political spectrum, reasonable-minded people. And this is not to say that I agree with them, because I may disagree with them. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that the room is balanced and everyone's opinion is welcome, including Marshall's. So the Rational Discussion Group, this is the only place at this hour of day on Clubhouse where you can have a good conversation, where the chat is open, and we can discuss the topics of the day. Today's topic was inspired by some people that create a space that don't allow chat unless you download Facebook. And the topic is, should U.S. troops fight drug cartels? I'm just going to give some opening thoughts because I think that's what others would do. So my opening thought on this is that if you want less drugs in this country, we should look at the laws that allow for drugs to be in the country. Let's start with the war on drugs. The war on drugs started in 1971. It was a Richard Nixon concoction. And so with this war on drugs, very similar to prohibition on alcohol, the federal government decided that just because they think it's bad for you, that it ought to be illegal. Now, if you recall what happened during prohibition, people that wanted to drink would still get their alcohol. But because it's illegal, you created an underground economy. This gave birth to not only street gangs here in the U.S. that were selling drugs on the corner. This is what happened with the war on drugs. The same thing that happened during Prohibition. Prohibition only lasted 12 and a half years. We've had this for over 50 years. But more specifically, in the title of the room, should U.S. troops fight drug cartels? Well, the drug cartels themselves are a product of the war on drugs, because if we were to legalize drugs, we could tax it and we could manufacture it here. We can manufacture and label it fentanyl-free, making it safer for all consumers of illicit drugs. But more importantly, we would minimize the danger of these drug cartels. We would take all the power away. Because if we were to make it legal, we can manufacture it, we can completely decimate that industry, and then what we can do is we can declare a legitimate war on drugs to say that if you operate outside of what we've made legal, then we are going to you're going to have serious repercussions. And that would be at country level. I think what we would do is we can work with closing off the border to anybody coming into the country, as long as Mexico is going to allow people to move illicit drugs. By the way, I think the consumers would probably approve of going to a dispensary to be able to purchase their drugs, knowing that they're safer and that they're tested. This is my opinion, but I want to hear from others. We've got a mixed panel here. What we're going to do here, a little bit different, is when you speak, I'm not going to move you down to the audience, because if you speak, somebody might have a response for you, and then to that response, you may want to respond back to them. The right of reply, I think, is very important. I'm going to pass it over to Anson and Moose. We'll start with Anson, we'll get to Moose, but Anson, go ahead and give us your thought.
Well, the reason I'm eagerly anticipating what's going to happen with this group is my concerns that we clearly state the problem, and that is the topic. What is the problem? And then if we agree on the problem but disagree on solutions, that is a legitimate debate, properly and calmly and rationally held. If we don't agree on the problem, then arguing about the solution isn't going to get us anywhere. So, Mojo, I think, stated the problem. Our problem. Okay. How best should we combat that illegal introduction of drugs into America? That's a broad topic. This one is picked specifically. Should the troops, U.S. troops, fight the drug cartels to mitigate the importation of drugs? So, to stay on topic, I would first suggest, I will offer my opinion very briefly. No. United States military troops should never be involved in law enforcement activities. God forbid, inside the United States, but even exterior to the United States. American troops are not trained as law enforcement agencies, and the use of them to enforce the laws is wrong-headed and should never even be considered. So I oppose the idea of U.S. troops fighting the cartels, but I would put a caveat to that. If they come into the country, cross the borders, and law enforcement is unable to thwart that action, then military action by the troops to enforce the sanctity of our borders might well be considered. I'll leave it at that.
Well said, well said. Who's, go ahead, let's get your thoughts on the cable.
I agree. I'll keep it brief. I don't have other speakers here. So I agree with Hanson. I don't think military, I don't think that was ever the purpose. Military to enforce laws. They're, they're would essentially make us literally a military state. And where we draw the line is even a bigger problem, right? If we're we'll start with, well, okay, let's war on drugs, right? Like you stated earlier, Mojo with Nixon. Then, where would we stop? And there has to be a distinction between what military represents and what DEA, drug enforcement agency, FBI, those agencies are better equipped. And it's counterintuitive to have military, like the rabbit hole that we could go down if we start with drugs, to continue down that path to enforce other laws in this country would, I think, just be extremely problematic, to say the least. As radical as it is, what if we tossed out the idea? We forget, not in history terms, not long ago, it's not the 1800s, it was, prohibition was real. The fact that you couldn't go out and buy beer. And of course, what happened was organized crime. Al Capone took full advantage of that. So, similar to today, if we legalize a lot of these drugs, it's going to essentially significantly reduce the demand for the need for the cartel and their business. So, basically what others have to say.
Hey, moderators, this is Congressman candidate John Kitover. I'd like to be put in the queue to answer this room title question.
Go right ahead, future Congressman Kitover. We're honored to have you here in our presence.
Thanks for organizing this room and having a rational discussion with regards to this topic. I asked Grok, hey Grok, why should the U.S. end the war on drugs? How much has been spent on the war on drugs since Nixon? And I tagged Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. Grok replied, the U.S. should end the war on drugs immediately because it has failed to reduce drug use or availability despite massive costs, fueled mass incarceration, disproportionately affecting minorities, exacerbated violence via black markets, and ignored effective public health approaches like treatment and harm reduction. Diverse analyses, this is all cited by the Brookings Institute and ACLU, show legalization and regulation saves lives and money. Since Nixon in 1971, over $1.2 trillion has been spent per estimates from the statistic in the White House Budget Office. That's the first thing I wanted to say in regards to title. This is what I wrote. This is what I would consider to be the next step. 1.2 trillion since 1971. This is the next step. Democracy dotters, ferocious fascism, cackling communists, equally frauds cavort crazily all over the globe. They are hemming us in. They are abortive births of the American liberty and dream. But liberty stirs once more in the womb of time. Evolution makes its changes by anti-socialistic ways. The abnormal man here on Clown House, who foresees the trend of the times and adapts circumstance intelligently, is laughed at, persecuted, censored, put in the goo, often destroyed by the herd. But he and his heirs, when the crisis comes, are survivors. Above us today hangs a danger never yet paralleled in history. We suppress the individual in more and more ways. We think in terms of the herd. War no longer kills soldiers, it kills all indiscriminately. Every new measure of the most democratic and autocratic governments is communistic in essence. It is always restriction. We are all treated as imbecile children. DORA, the Shops Acts, the motoring laws, Sunday suffocation, and clubhouse censorship. They won't trust us to cross the roads at will.
John, you're getting off topic.
Well, I'm just about finished. When I'm finished, I will say I am complete. Fascism is like communism and dishonest into the bargain. The
We're
dictate.
not discussing fascism and communism. We're discussing military troops to fight the drug cartels. Thank you very much.
Well, the moderators have
Do you want to
spoken.
take 30 seconds to give us your opinion on whether U.S. troops should fight drug cartels?
Sure, absolutely. The United States military should not use their most precious asset, our troops, to attack international narco-terrorist organizations. Instead, we should no longer allow illegalization and incarceration of Americans who choose to use intoxicants. In fact, we should let out all prisoners in all U.S. prisons who are there for using drugs. And we should also stop all funding to the DEA, as well as cut the NDAA by $400 billion per year and bring down our national defense budget to $600 billion a year. I am complete.
Wow, Mojo, this is pretty informed there. You just want to call the numbers.
Yeah. Would anyone like to take the position that we should have U.S. troops fight drug cartels? It seems like that's a position that Donald Trump is leaning towards. I'm just curious if anybody supports that option. Anybody?
I think that option's more effective than our overburdened law enforcement agencies because clearly they're not doing a good job. I'll be honest with you, I feel like that's
How long was that? Like 60 seconds? Can't even read a little thing. Nobody has any patience.
Temporarily, I mean, the illicit drug cartels, it's like $150 billion business every year for them. So that's not really going to do anything to fix the problem. And, you know, I have some reservations about legalization simply because, you know, I worry particularly about the youth in our country and normalizing the legalization of drug use. I don't think that's necessarily a great idea. Our health care system is already burdened by like $740 billion a year on treating things like overdoses and handling addiction issues. So I worry that that's just going to expound on that cost as well. And I don't really know that decriminalizing it, which is kind of like that midway road, I don't know that
First of all, again, we got to be careful. Are we trying to stop the importation of drugs across our borders? Yes or no? Of course we are. Law enforcement is trying. But the other problem is once the drugs are here, how do we enforce the current laws? Is the inability of law enforcement to do either of those a result of inept law enforcement, or is it a result of the laws that we expect them to enforce?
It's an interesting thought. Adam, so you were supporting what you were starting to say. Did you want to maybe build on that and perhaps respond to what Anson said?
Give me a second. Sorry, I'm in a store.
There's I'm not nowhere near as educated on this as an answer. But if you're talking to the good gut tells me that you think of allies, right? So drugs are the cartels just bring drugs to America. They have dealings all around the world, at least the big cartels, right? So it would be one of those situations where just like a war, you need allies around the world to combat the takeover of these governments where these cartels are in the government. And yeah, it's very complicated. I don't know the answer to this. Create NATO to impede international drug trafficking. Yes. Yeah, but you have to do this wisely because they have all the money, right? Corruption. Corruption is people being privately paid off to, go against, this type of a mission like this. But again, I think it has to be a global thing. Yeah. Do you think we should talk about the role that China plays in the fentanyl getting to Mexico before the fentanyl makes it into the drugs that come across the border that Americans are addicted to? Maybe we should talk about the role that China plays and what we can do about that, and maybe even talk about is this China's retaliation for what we did bringing opium to them? Too soon.
Well, when you see how people respond to the fentanyl, the zombie apocalypse in major U.S. cities where people are just lurched over. I smoke cannabis and I drink alcohol, beer and wine, and sometimes vodka. I don't think it's good for my health, but I still enjoy the way it makes me feel. But I'm not lurched over in a street. That drug is particularly destructive, and it does seem like that is an attack on our population. And if we have selfless kindness and love for our fellow citizens, we shouldn't allow them to even have access to it. Or we should. See, I think you can play both sides of the fence here and never really find a real good solution. And I apologize for doing that oratory of reading, from a script. But I think, I hate to go off topic, but if the room doesn't look at this as a philosophical topic as well, I think there's a big point to miss about freedom of choice. But I also believe that housing in a country $37 trillion in debt should have been a priority. There shouldn't be homelessness per se at scale. If you go to usdebt.org, they say we only have 700,000 homeless in this country. Bullshit. There are millions upon millions. I think it's probably like 10 million, maybe, Americans are technically homeless. There's just so many variables to deal with, I feel like, and this is always like an all or nothing question. Should we end the war on drugs, or should we use the military to deploy? I mean, can you imagine if the U.S. Air Force starts doing strikes on the southern border against narco terrorist assets, their facilities, their growth fields, their distribution routes. I mean, when does the war end? You know, we need peace, and that's why I say philosophy is important, because if you're not exhibiting a positive vibration like Mojo and maybe the mods, we'll never have peace in this country. We will have perpetual war and death until the eventual eruption, destruction, implosion. We will eat our own substance out by being neurotic and engaging in nonstop warplay, gameplay of that nature. We need to focus on business, and good business doesn't involve airstrikes all around the world 24/7. Obama's hope and change was a lie. He enhanced the number of strikes globally, deployed Predator drones to every major, city that he was doing, and launched. What I'm saying is, we need peace now. That's my opinion. I am complete.
Yeah, all right. Project sorry. Go ahead. Jump on. Yeah. So I'm actually at the tail end of my lunch break right now. But here's what I will say. I do believe that the military should be fighting the war on drugs. I 100% agree with serendipity in that law enforcement, both on a local level and a federal level,
have failed miserably. They've allowed themselves to become corrupted themselves as organizations. They've allowed to have, as they continue to protect their own without looking at the gains of protecting the American public. I do believe that more lethal force should be sanctioned at the border. You know, when you do identify that there's certain people that are moving across certain cartels, trade lines, I believe that the military should take whatever form of action, up and including to death, in preventing those people from coming over the border. And as far as the drug dealers are concerned, you know, I'm tired of these shootouts, you know, these standoffs. Send a grenade in there, blow the whole place up, send them back down to hell, and let it be done with. If you are accused and convicted of selling drugs to somebody's teenager that resulted in death, you should be given the death penalty. And I think that there should be given a certain fast track around our Constitution in putting you to death sooner. So until we actually adopt these type of attitudes of really taking this situation by control, of really holding people accountable in terms of what their contribution into this mess is and how it's affected society, and render the same level of consequences, I think that people would take a second thought before setting up at your school's neighborhood bus stop and selling drugs to 13-year-olds. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Should we fight the war on drugs by increased severity of legal penalties? And should we take it as far as the use of lethal force by the military or by law enforcement? Lethal force, increase the authority for lethal force in order to better deal with the war on drugs. I can tell you, I adamantly oppose that, but I sure would like to hear somebody supportive of, and I respectfully do that, Doctor. Wait a minute, I asked for somebody else.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Okay. This is supposed to be a conversation, folks, not just a two-way debate.
And Anson, sorry, I was stepped away. What was your question that you wanted an answer to?
Should we better fight the war on drugs by dramatically enhancing legal penalties, including use of the death penalty, and using lethal force on the border and in our streets, increasing the use of lethal force in order to better fight the war on drugs? That's essentially what Doctor was advocating. I'm not going to go point by point to rebut that, but I sure would like to hear somebody, if they endorse or oppose what the doctor just proposed.
Gotcha. Well, I'll say real quick before somebody else wants to go. Apparently, California has over the year Prop 36 addresses specifically that, where if prosecutors are able to pinpoint an OD, mostly around fentanyl, but I'm guessing it's around other drugs as well, to the dealer, they potentially could be charged for homicide, or at least involuntary manslaughter.
But that is using existing laws with more rigor. It is not increasing this, it is not using the laws to increase legal penalties and use of lethal force in our streets and on the borders.
I can answer this for you, Captain. Sir, with all due respect, I would disagree with it. But I would agree with you if it's the only plan to target cartels and not fundamentally work with the Mexican government to help shore up some of their, in some facets, to help build their economy so that the people could work. But sir, with all due respect, these cartels traffic, kidnap, ransom, torture. They take wholesale groups of people, and I don't know, sir. Like if I had received that order, I have no problem sending them to go meet Davy Jones, and I would do it gladly over and over again, just because of the level of violence and human degradation that they bring out to the world. I don't know if it would fix America without other internal policies. I'll leave that for the people that are smarter than me. But as somebody, I would say, let me at him, sir, and I promise you he won't cross a single line.
Would you use that same, if you were ordered to go into the streets of America to do what you just suggested we do, as opposed to going across, or were you restricting your comments to moving across the border to engage with the cartels in their own territory in Mexico?
I would never want someone like me deployed on the streets of America. Americans don't want me on the streets of America trying to go target people. I'd leave that up for the domestic forces. You would want us, or and particularly you, guys like you, to target outside of that. That's our role. That's our area. Like internally, that's up to the people here. You have to decide what kind of stance and policies you want domestically. But should we bring in people that are? Should we allow these people to prey upon our citizens, rape them, kill them, murder them, torture them, and put them in? It kind of irks me on that. I say let us go and draw the line at our borders and let the domestic policies take that.
Yeah, so I want to jump in this real quick. So we have models that look much different from the U.S. model. If you look at, for example, Portugal, where they legalized drugs, but they also destigmatized it and opened up a lot of rehab facilities to make sure that they could help people that suffered from addiction. This was the Portugal approach, which was very libertarian in their desire to allow people to do what they want to do, but offer them the help that they might need. If you compare that to a zero tolerance policy, such as Singapore, where they have harsh penalties, small amounts of drugs will result in many years in prison and even being caned. They also have random drug testing for the individuals, as well as compulsory rehabilitation. If you are caught utilizing drugs for the first time, they will put you in rehab and even offer long-term supervision after your release. They also have strict border and customs enforcement to prevent it coming in at the border. Something that we don't care what comes in this border. And I won't get too political, but it seems like we turn a blind eye to everything that is at our border, whether it's drugs, whether it's people, it doesn't seem to matter. And so I guess I would just throw this out there that when looking at these approaches, Singapore's got the zero tolerance. They didn't have to go and send their troops into other countries. They were just able to take very drastic measures within their borders, which has resulted in probably the lowest drug use that you'll see in any country on planet Earth. Feel free to respond anytime.
I don't know if those models would actually work with the Mexican cartels or the Canadian cartels, for the few that are doing their stuff up north. I don't know if that model would actually work over here with the stranglehold and the weaponry that the let's not forget the cartels actually have a significant stake in agricultural products, so they're shipping them over mixed with their drugs, but of course they're sending over agricultural products. I think we could lock down the border. I think we could do a better job in the Gulf, and I think domestically you could say, hey, we're gonna remove some of these scheduled drugs, and you're gonna do you. It hasn't looked so great in Oregon, Portland particularly. I do know Portugal is suffering some problems. It hasn't gone quite as smoothly as people like to elaborate. So I don't know what the correct answer is, but I don't think people should be in prison because whatever they want to do to their body, they should be free. But I also don't think we should have the Mexican cartels hooking people on and then killing them with fentanyl or other drugs, as well as trafficking kids and arms and weapons and money. Like all of that combined, I feel these cartels prey not only on the Mexican citizens, but also on the United States citizens. And I think we can do better cooperation with Mexico and even the Central American countries at large.
I've got a quick question for you, Brad. If Mexico and Canada take strong exception to you and me as military members going across their borders to fight the cartels, how do you deal with that? And second, I would observe that this whole discussion has been centered about how we can reduce the supply side of the equation. I have yet to hear, other than legalization, even that doesn't do it. How do you address the demand side?
So I'm not a psychologist or a doctor on this. So you and I both know the sea lanes and the seas well enough to know that how they're getting them across. I mean, I'm literally looking at a map on my wall that has my old routes on it, and from the interventions and the targets that we had. I mean, we know what they're doing. We know how they're doing it. We know what types of crafts they're using. It's not hard to just go ahead and do it. And if the countries don't want us there, we can do simply what we did to North Korea. We can just contain them and corral them into a port. We can lock down the land barrier that's ours, and they can just make all the cocaine they want to. It's just not going to be sold there. And we can definitely achieve that. I mean, some of it will get smuggled, but we can achieve it. As far as domestically getting people off drugs, I don't know. America's weird. It's not like other nations. We're never happy with just what we have. It has to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, or more potent. I mean, we went from peace, love, dope, and marijuana in the 60s to now, like, I mean, the 80s was like full-blown coke, and now we're talking about fentanyl. And it seems every 10 years, 20 years, it seems like something bigger, better has to come along for Americans. We're just never happy with just a simple joint. Even marijuana is not marijuana from the 60s. Today, that shit is, good luck with that. You're not going to find that. I've never heard people talk about THC levels and how excited they are to walk around like a zombie just from inhaling or taking in THC. So, I mean, I don't know. How to treat the domestic side, I really don't know. Maybe make it legal, but making beer legal didn't cure alcoholism. So I don't think making drugs is going to solve that problem.
I wanted to come up and give the perspective of someone that is on the supply side, the traffic side, most of it. Because we don't produce, but I am in Guatemala, so we don't produce the drug, but we are the number one gateway of it. That was the United States. So I put in a on the tab that I uploaded to my iCloud, so that you can watch. It's a very old picture. I believe it was Inside Crime that did it. A full report that since has been probably censored, but that was years ago. That was 2019, And it still is the situation. So most of the South America production of the drugs come through Guatemala. And yeah, that was one piece of data that you probably wanted to know.
Show their true identity, especially women, online. But it's the difference between Gary, Scott, and Alan and Dismal.
That's interesting. Can you help us understand the importance of why Guatemala? Like the map shows, obviously, if accurate, some pattern here. But what is the strategic advantage? Is it geographic? What is it? What's the value add of Guatemala?
It's the last country between Mexico and the United States, and it has shores in each of the oceans and ports in each of the oceans. And it's always been like that. It's been the choke point of the drug traffic from South America production into the United States. So it's shipped here through submarines or mostly flights, and also by land. But if you see all those are the routes, the known routes by law enforcement of shipments. And well, I think it speaks for itself.
Hey, this is Congressman candidate John. I'd like to interject some new information into this conversation. It is relevant and topical. The U.S. national debt is now at $37 trillion, and the U.S. total debt, which is unfunded debt and interest, is $105 trillion. So if you want to go to war and fund trillions of dollars to go to war to do airstrikes on narco-terrorist assets facilities in Mexico and other countries, because it's not just going to be Mexico. They've got targeting destinations all around the Caribbean, I'm sure. And now that they put a $50 million bounty on the head of Venezuela, there's a lot of assets that can be targeted by our beautiful and multi-trillion-dollar Air Force. The question is opening Pandora's box in our best interest, or is fiscal responsibility, prudence, and common sense in our best interest and the true nature of self-defense, which is, buying what you can afford and being frugal and prudent, as opposed to just spending trillions and trillions and trillions of more dollars on forever war against narco-terrorists? Is it worth it? Oh, I forgot to say I am complete.
There are leaders in the you get people like Andrew Robbins, Dr. Jody Spencer, and others that could make a difference in mental health around the country, and starting with the young people, learning new ways of approaching life without, religion doesn't have to be ostracized in this way, because a lot of people that are religious use these kind of ways in approaching life. Right? And when you talk about the usage of the drugs, most people, like you said earlier, John, when you drink a little bit, and it's not that good for you, but you're not an addict. You're not someone that has.
So do think it's illegal, and I do think these kind of people I mentioned,
education.
if they're working with the government, they would be able to influence families and children in a different way, so that the end result of it would be that it would be pretty transformational, and that
I thought the Night's Watch might make a man of you. Managed to stay soft.
His religion on somebody.
Something
where families would be involved, children would be involved, and it would be common sense because of science and data, and proof's in the pudding right there. So what would happen is just the knowledge of it is one thing, but then the practice of it is another. It's like going to the gym. You should go to the gym, but do you go? Right? So the follow through with these kind of different intentions would take a while. It would be such common sense that families would want their children to understand these kind of principles and these kind of exercises.
I want to let all the racist white people in this room know that your next president is going to be a black woman, and I know that's triggering to you, but
come on my eyelashes, Kamala Harris. You didn't have black women. Wait. Is he taken? Is it a white man?
What do you mean?
Walk around a little empty, and the reason why is one of the reasons there are people that engage a little bit too much. It's because they're trying to chase that happiness and chase that emptiness. So that, I think, it would be, I don't like to use the word war on war.
I think it would be more awareness and enlightenment coupled with, like what Brad was talking about, isolating these concepts.
Can I just say?
Go ahead, John.
I always like to ask the question: if you were king or emperor, or the number one guy, and you were looking after your tribe, your people, what are your priorities? For your people. And to me, if I'm sitting in the Oval Office, I'm the president, I'm thinking, how am I going to help the people of my nation? What can I do with them? Fighting drug cartels is not on my top 10 list of to-dos. There's a lot of other problems, and you can just come on Clownhouse and take a quick sample of the general audio and communication that's happening here, and know that education is really malignant. It's just not there. I'm lucky I can communicate clearly and speak English. One of the rules of this house is that you have to speak English. And, that communication is what allows for transactions and really a de-conflict, a de-escalation of friction in society. I'm just saying that spending trillions of dollars to expand forever wars is not in the financial long-term positive vibration of our people. We have to be very mindful of the books now at 37 trillion. We can't plunge trillions, and we can't keep spending $2 trillion a year that we don't have.
Thank you, John. I believe you were contributing to the conversation, exploring the demand side and seeking with uncertainty how to better control the demand side. And I agree that it's confusing, it is difficult. But somebody also said something related to prohibition, which I found kind of interesting as I thought about it. Prohibition was designed to drastically reduce the ravages of excessive use of alcohol in the country. And it failed miserably. And ever since prohibition,
As far as I know, about 20%, 10 to 20% of the population suffer from alcoholism. And the country has pretty much accepted that. If we illegalize drugs, I wonder what do we find that maybe 5, 10, 15% of the country, many of them that are already suffered from alcoholism. Do we accept that ravaging of the nation and comply with John's admonition to spend our money better somewhere else?
I wish I could get on board with the legalization, but I just, as a mom, my mind keeps going back to the kids, and the thing of it is, we already have an epidemic of over-medicating our kids with legal medication. What are the ramifications of opening up this whole new world to them where you're suddenly combining, parents don't teach their kids to cope anymore, and they give them a pill for it. And then you combine that with the use of legalized illicit drugs. What are we looking at doing to our future generations? Like this, that's the part I can't get around, making that access easier.
What if I offered you an alternative here where, first of all, we have zero tolerance of narcotics at the border? I think that should be a start. And the legalization piece, I think, hear me out, could be worked into the private sector where we make sure that the drugs are fentanyl free. But then what if instead of, to alleviate your concern that you don't want your kids doing it, what if we sectioned off a portion of the United States, which just for the sake of argument, we'll call it Barstow, California. And if we were to just deem that a drug zone, and then say that it's basically Singapore-style drug regulations outside of that zone, and then Portugal-style, smoke them if you got them, if you're within the confines of Barstow. And we only allow adults into Barstow, and so kids would not have access to it. It's people that would opt, if you want to be a drug addict, if that's your choice, we will move you. You have two options. We can either get you rehab or we send you to Barstow. What do you think of that one? I think that's pretty much the same thing, because Barstow's an island between LA and Barstow.
Congress shall assemble at least once in every year. Such amendment.
Adam, do you like that idea? That we legalize it in Barstow? It's not like that. So Adam seems to be more in line with the policies of the Supreme Court. I think what we should though, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We have people that are across the political spectrum, maybe not equal representation, but it sounds like there's a couple of people that want to open up the possibility of using U.S. troops, but across the political spectrum, we're getting a larger agreement that using troops was the wrong thing. Do you think that's interesting that we're finding consensus across the political spectrum?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised that there wouldn't be more folks that were pro military, intervention in the Nixon's infamous, war on drugs. I also find it interesting that, actually I'm glad that Serendipity brought up that point about legalized drugs and how schools and psychiatrists and parents are just quick to give the pill, or really addressing the issue with the child or adults. No one's really mentioned the opioid crisis that country went through. All the legalized drugs that doctors were writing scripts for left and right. And where was the accountability? What was it? The Purdue farmer, the Sackler family. They paid a couple of million.
Prescribing opiates.
Yeah. And I think that there was a slap in the wrist. I mean, a couple of billion for them is like, you know, a cup of coffee for most people in this room. So it's like.
So essentially now, doctors have gone to the extreme, or essentially, pardon my hyperbole, but if you're walking to the ER with a gunshot wound, like trying to get a painkiller, because now they're overcorrecting because of the opioid crisis. It's like, oh yeah, you're not gonna, I'm not gonna be the doctor that you're responsible for helping them on. And so that's sad because now there are plenty of people that do live with chronic pain, have legitimate issues that are not drug addicts. That it's quality of life, and so when we do a society is overcorrect to the point of where those folks who really need it have a much bigger, it's just far more difficult for them to get it, versus when they were giving it out like M&Ms and popcorn. So it's like, but for some reason, there wasn't really a lot of critique or scrutiny around the folks who were accused of the opioid crisis because it was legal. It wasn't, barely coming over the borders. Hospitals use fentanyl the regular. Obviously, they're not using it to the doses that the zombies use it in these cities that are using it, of course. We hear about fentanyl appearing in marijuana. So it's, what is, so if you're going to trust in the war on drugs, where is there's been some talk about rehab. I think Mojo you're talking about, I think it was in Portugal, like with the libertarian approach of, less, more mercy. The drugs aren't the problem, the addiction is the problem. Well, I think that is usually one of the main divides between the left and the right versus no, you're using a legal drug. Typically the agenda point on the right, and the left is like, no, they just need help, they just have an addiction, and there has to be something in the middle. That's
Moose, have you been to an open air drug market in a major U.S. city and seen what it looks like?
Anyway, that's really about it. But I just think that found it hard to ignore that the opioid crisis we just sort of glazed over that. And many Americans, lost their lives to addiction, or their homes, families. And yet, they were legal, so I wasn't really happy with that.
I couldn't get the pills anymore, and then they started having to go for the regular street drugs. You take, for example, Odyssey, but also normally the heroin. You couldn't get the actual pills anymore, and so folks would resort to black market stuff, which I guess is a reason for drug legalization. I think as long as you're able to smuggle it, it'll be a cartel. Before it was guns, drugs, and people, it was cattle. Before it was cattle, it was cotton for Confederacy. Before it was alcohol, and cotton, and cattle. Point being, as long as there's been a war, there's been smuggling. So there will be some sort of smuggling organization that exists along the border between the United States and Mexico, no matter what we do. The question is how large is it, what effect does it have? There will always be some organization that does their work. I want to provide my, Mojo just provided a brief summary. I want to provide my own, if I may. First, I want to really thank Mojo for starting this room. This is the first time. And I echo what Moose said in Twitter is that we have reached a substantial agreement across political lines. 85%
think we should carefully and prudently legalize drugs. And at least that percentage, so we didn't have a vote, suggest that the use, are opposed to the use of military forces.
To fight specifically the cartels, but I don't think we need to, we didn't talk about it, but I think, generally speaking, the solution to the drug problem is not the use of military forces on the part of the United States. And there seems to be an emerging consensus in the room for that. And I hate the Great Divide. And when we can find a way to talk ourselves in an hour to consensus on some difficult subjects, I applaud the attempt to do that. And I certainly am going to do what I can to continue that effort. I had some other profound thought, but I'm so old it slips my mind unless I write it down. But I think, this discussion has added to other questions for another room. Specifically, if we want to talk about drugs again, which we may or may not do. But we can now break it down based upon what I've heard in this room and have a room to say, how can we better improve the supply side, i.e. the prevention of the introduction of drugs into American society? What are the solutions to doing whatever we have to do on the supply side? And then have another room on the same topic of how can we better address the demand side. And I'm just saying, I'm happy that this Mojo, Roger, that we need to find a way to moderate the Great Divide. And I appreciate your efforts in doing it, and I'll continue to support it.
No, I appreciate it. Appreciate you, Anson. I think this has been a good room, and we'll keep it going for another 30 minutes, and then I got to do some things. So I want to make sure that anyone that wants to contribute gets an opportunity to do that now. Anyone that hasn't had a chance to speak, or if you've spoken before and you want to add some thoughts, please jump in.
I would like to add that I think you're at the brink of understanding the whole problem, and it's going to show to be a domestic problem. It is my belief, and I have very good reasons to think that the drug cartel, the principal drug cartel in the world, is the CIA and the intelligence agencies of the powerful nations in the world. So, if you fix that, if you abolish the CIA, that would be a good day.
Anybody want to push back on abolishing the CIA?
I'll push back on it by describing and changing the perspective on it. It's not so much the drug cartel, but it's power structures. And I would favor the intelligence agency of my country in control of the power structure over that of what is essentially a terrorist organization. It could be a distinction without a difference between the two, but maybe I just have a bias.
Can I just push back against it, actually, Roger?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I just want to quote the 29th verse of the Tao Te Ching. This is Chinese psychology. It's really the theory about doing nothing, that there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. I just think it's, at the CIA, at the FBI, at the IRS, it's probably a leadership and education, a wokeism problem. But this is the 29th verse. Does anyone want to take the world and do what he wants with it? I do not see how he can succeed. The world is a sacred vessel which must not be tampered with or grabbed after. To tamper with it is to spoil it, and to grasp it is to lose it. In fact, for all things there is a time for going ahead and a time for following behind, a time for slow breathing and a time for fast breathing, a time to grow in strength and a time to decay, a time to be up and a time to be down. Therefore, the clubhouse sage avoids all extremes, excesses, and extravagances. I am complete.
You know, what I appreciated about this room most is in the beginning with Anson clarifying that we need to agree that there is a problem. If we agree there is a problem, then we can start to define better what the problem is specifically, and then we can get into solutions. I think people have done a good job of illustrating that not only is there a supply side problem, there's a demand side problem, and I appreciate that nuance. There's also other approaches, alternatives to sending U.S. troops to fight drug cartels. I would just like to submit, though, that when I talk about favoring legalization of drugs, it's not because I think people ought to use them. It's that when I look at the results of what happened in Portugal, the long-term use actually decreased. And I don't think that's something we should ignore. I think we should actually try to better understand how is it that you made it legal, more easily accessible, and yet long-term use was reduced. I think we should better try to understand that. The other thing that I want to be careful of is I don't believe that reducing the amount of people that use drugs is even really the goal that I have in mind. If somebody wants to use drugs, like, for example, if Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones decides that he wants to be in his hotel room and use illicit drugs, I don't really care about that. That's a personal choice that he can make. The problem that I have is the violence that's associated with obtaining the drugs. Because when you drive something into the underground, if you can't go to the police and if you can't utilize the courts, you're going to utilize a different system of justice. And this is why if you're selling crack cocaine on a rival street corner in the city of Baltimore, or you could pick whatever big city you'd like, this is where you have violence. And if you look at the gun violence in this country that people rail about when they talk about they want to restrict your access to guns or gun ownership rules, they forget that when you eliminate suicide and when you eliminate justifiable homicide, of the homicide rates, the majority of that is contained to about 6 city blocks in about 10 U.S. cities. That's the overwhelming majority. And so, and then if you ask yourself, well, what's causing the violence? It's not necessarily using the drugs, it's the business of selling drugs. So I think there's more to explore here, and I appreciate people not wanting their children to have access to these drugs. But just because something is bad for you doesn't necessarily mean that the right solution is to make it illegal. I would compare this in many ways to those that are trying to restrict sugar intake, for example. I'm opposed to that as well. I think that we should have the same laws for cocaine, for heroin, that we do for selling onions.
Mojo, with the Portugal experiment, did they really legalize all drugs across the board? At what levels and how far did they go?
So they rolled it out over time, but before they did that, they offered a ton. And this is something that conservatives and myself probably have to struggle with, and this is why it failed in Portland. Is before they legalized it, they made sure that they had all of the courts aligned to be able to, instead of punish somebody and sentence them to a jail, to be able to give them the alternative to go rehab themselves. So if somebody found themselves in a courtroom over, or maybe they were in jail previously on drug charges, they got resentenced to go to rehab, and then what they did when they legalized it is they made these centers optional for you to check into. And what they found was there was a lot of people that wanted off, and by decriminalizing it, what they did was they destigmatized it. And so there's a problem that people have when they're an addict. It's not only that they're addicted to the substance and what they'll do to get the substance, which violates other laws, but the other thing is they don't like to raise their hand because of the stigma that's attached to it, because then people say, oh, they're a drug addict. And I think when you approach it with love and with empathy, and you say, okay, we're going to suggest that, and give you all of the tools necessary, that if you don't want to use drugs, we're going to offer this to you. So I don't think we'd be able to successfully pull off the Portugal model unless we've modeled everything that they did. And that started with making sure that they had adequate rehab and all of the other tools to handle people, to make sure that if their choice was to avoid drugs, that they had those tools at their disposal.
I would comment on one part of that, Mojo. Given the choice of incarceration or rehab. Rehab, in my view, is a joke in this nation. And we have made very little progress in figuring that I think we found is, quite frankly, AA. And that percentage rate is pretty damn low. But you go to any AA room, and if there's 20 people in the room, there's going to be 2, 3, maybe 5 that are going to have their sheet signed by the moderator, by the guy that runs the room, so that they can prove to the judge that they're continuing to go to AA. If we want to make inroads into the demand side, I suggest that the mental health community needs to get its act together and develop a warp speed COVID-like program
to rehab people, which is a combination of psychology, medication. Just relying on the spiritual approach in AA is, as we've been doing for the last 80 plus years, is not going to get the percentages anywhere of success anywhere farther up the scale than we are right now. So I would suggest a major effort on the part of the mental health community to figure out how to better rehab addiction is a crying need. What they found was that if you offer cocaine to mice, the ones that will go and utilize it are the ones that are not socialized with the other mice. Now, we don't know for sure if this plays out the same way with human beings, but it stands for reason that if you're isolated, if you're alone, if you don't have a social connection with people that are living law-abiding, traditional values in their life, I would imagine that if we could identify people that are isolated and make genuine attempts to end that isolation, that would be the best effort that we can make that would help people to resist the temptation of drugs. Because that study is very fascinating. That the thing that leads to the biggest predictor of which mice are going to use it are the ones that have already isolated themselves from the other mice.
It is kind of fascinating. Although I think I would imagine it's case specific though. I could see that working for fentanyl. Fentanyl users, I've never done it, but my understanding is you're not looking to do equations and be socialized, that you're essentially looking for not out, not off. But the other drugs that were very conducive to partying in the rave scene in Bali and cooking the 80s, the stockbrokers doing coke at lunch and Molly to go to raves and ecstasy and all that. I think it would be case specific, similarly, I think marijuana is it's unique in that way because I think there's a lot of stoners that are very antisocial, and they just zone out at home, doing their thing, playing video games, whatever it is. But
some people read books. I'm just saying that people use drugs for performance enhancement, experience enhancement, and Big Pharma pumped trillions of dollars worth of experimental mRNA vaccines into our bodies. And I think that a room that has an all or nothing title is generally clickbait. And I'm just saying that if you were to do a full assessment and expand your scope, you would see that this small little room title, which deals with a very specific, operation, because it could be global. It doesn't just have to be Mexico. Couldn't it be, the heroin distributors from Afghanistan or Italy? Like, where does the war end on fighting international narcotic smugglers and terrorists?
Where it ends, we don't know. Where it starts with identifying that it's a problem.
Well, the thing is, people use the drugs in an application, like Moose just said, in the rave. In the 80s, it was the blow, it was the discotheque. I mean, if anybody here doesn't understand the moral dilemma with vice and police activities or monopolies of drug distribution, you have to think about human behavior, human science. People want that dopamine. Clown House is a safe, medical device technology app to get your speakers dopamine. But people that go out on a Friday and Saturday night, a lot of those people use even more chemicals to enhance their experience. I think it's a waste of the chemical. I'm just saying I like the book club.
But you're also not considering, and maybe you have, it's not just, as you know, John, the ravers and the partiers. We have a number of drug users who turn to drugs to cope due to trauma, depression, insecurities, but primarily due to trauma. So as long as you have people who need drugs to cope, to mask their pain from trauma, childhood abuse, et cetera, it's going to be very hard to crack down on this war of drugs, part of the war. People who need the drug, people who don't want mental health help, who don't want rehab, who go through rehab and fail because they're in a lot of pain. And
no, I get it.
Drugs is their only recourse.
It's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. What I'm saying is, if you're going to use a drug, you might as well enhance your long-term outcome by using the drug responsibly. And in my opinion, a lot of people who use Adderall, many people use it, in college to study. That may not be that bad of an application of that drug to actually increase your intelligence. However, there's downsides to using Adderall. So it eats you away. It's methamphetamine. So there's an upside and a downside. It's a question is, what's your ROI on using that chemical in your body? Are you wasting it picking your toes in Poughkeepsie and playing, Clown House or PlayStation or reading comic books? I don't know. That's a personal liberty question you have to ask yourself. What am I doing right now?
He just said something that was brilliant. And I want to encompass it, and that is the real issue with addiction is the use of drugs to cope. The first step in the 12 steps is I became powerless over alcohol, and I was powerless over alcohol, and my life became unmanageable. I disagree, and I've got about 30 years of experience with this. I disagree with that, but I'm not going to rewrite the big book. My life became unmanageable, and then I became powerless over alcohol. If you address the unmanageability of an addict or a normal person's life, then you make tremendous strides in reducing the excessive use of drugs and alcohol. And I think you hit the nail on the head, NY, and I really appreciate
it's a year helping them kick the habit. And they have been clean and sober for about 3 years now. I dare say it's one of my greatest accomplishments in life because I didn't think it was possible. And so I get it. And I know this person turned to drugs and alcohol to cope with a lot of grief, and trauma. And sometimes the mental health is not enough. The threat of death is not enough, to get them to get clean and sober. Incarceration is not enough. Sometimes tough love and patience win. So I just wanted to add that because John was mentioning the party element, and I didn't know if the mental health element had been discussed yet.
Yeah, as someone that had a drinking problem, I realized that undergirding that was a thinking problem. There were choices that I was making that led to me not being where I wanted to be at that time in my life. And by turning to alcohol, I didn't need to think about those things. I didn't need to think about, maybe, not achieving the level of income or success at that point in time in my life. That all came later. But the alcohol, some of it was fun. Some of it was like, hey, let's just go out and have a good time. But the reality was, I was avoiding dealing with other issues that were. I was more comfortable with spending my like a ridiculous amount of money on alcohol, and spending all of my evenings overindulging, and then spending the next day recovering, because that was less of a problem to me than dealing with the fact of the real issues in life. Like, why did I underachieve here? Why did I fail there? Why am I not as competitive in the workplace? And then once I gave it some thought, the very thing that caused me to stop drinking alcohol was the thing that caused me to open up all kinds of avenues in my life, improving relationships with friends and family, financial success, all of those things. And so it's a thinking problem. So I would say that where you find addiction, you've got something that precedes that led to the addiction, that made the addiction tolerant to drink. And I don't have an addiction to other substances, so I don't want to speak on those things. All I can say is that as somebody that struggled with alcohol abuse, I would not want them to ban alcohol. I would just hope that people could be more thoughtful of like, why am I turning to this substance? And my life has improved dramatically since I stopped drinking. And so, open invitation if anybody struggles with alcohol and they need somebody to talk to, you can back channel me. I'm happy to have that conversation.
I would like to offer a controversial contrarian position to the defense of alcohol in 2025.
Go right ahead.
So I think anything in excess is, dangerous. And there's a lot of people that work for alcohol distribution companies that live in Chicago. And there's a lot of bars and a lot of restaurants that sell an ice cold beer with a delicious slice of cheese pizza and pepperoni. And, that's part of society. I think, I told my mom the other day, I was like, Mom, why don't we just do a podcast and we'll call it Let's Complain About Everything and Be as Cheap as Possible. Because, to me, that's kind of a Protestant ethic. But the fact is that you can go to Walgreens right now and choose from 50 different cigarettes and buy any type of alcohol, liquor, wine, beer, and that shit is just as dangerous or as damaging as all the other drugs, really. I mean, some completely destroy your brain, but, in terms of enforcement, there is this double jeopardy with vice and police criminal activity and, gangs. But the fact that you can go to Walgreens and buy a publicly, approved of type of product, I'm just saying there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe, but to send special forces overseas to conduct assassination, hits against narco terrorists is very dangerous. And if you're a parent and your son is in the Army or the Marines and you want them to go over there and start killing narco terrorists, well, there's probably a better strategy. And if you play chess, you realize you don't sacrifice your soldiers in a futile attempt to control a drug marketplace. Work within your perimeter, secure a 360-degree perimeter, and work your way in. You don't work your way out of this solution. You work your way into this solution. You got to go within yourselves and in the country. I mean, I walk around Chicago. I don't even hear English. And if I was a bounty hunter and given a license to round up illegal aliens, well, you know what? I might start that business opportunity, but we don't have a free and open marketplace. We have a controlled economy. It's all based on fiat currency. Anyways, I could go on, but I love the room, and I hope you've all enjoyed this incredible rational discussion group. I am complete.
Hey, Mojo and Anson, sounds like you both have had your journey with alcohol. I give you both kudos, and Jennifer, I think both in the chat. It's funny. I think part of the problem with addiction, particularly with alcohol, is because it is socially acceptable, right? If you're single, you go on a date, yeah, sure, you can meet up for a cup of coffee, but on the average, I think it's safe to say most people will go and meet up for a drink, for the icebreaker. You're going to go to after-work happy hour with coworkers. So it's easy, it's easy to not recognize that maybe you're doing too many happy hours. Maybe those happy hours have gone from coworkers to a happy hour by yourself at home. And it's interesting because I've heard some stories. I've got a regular Friday night poker game, very low stakes, like $20, with everybody but me. They're all AA. I am what they call their token normie. I'm able to open up a bottle of wine, have one glass, and that's it. Maybe not drink for a week, a month, 6 months, whatever. The spirit moves me. But yes, some of their stories and some of their rock bottom stories, many of them realize that they're lucky to be alive. I think most of it was alcohol abuse, but there's definitely those who dabbled as old school heroin and junkies, and literally when they're robbing people to get their fix, right? So I always have high respect for those that were like, you know what, whatever the addiction may be, this is not working, right? And Mojo, you outlined things that weren't working for you. And I think that is, what did Shakespeare say above all else? Know thyself. So it's, obviously fentanyl is a problem, but I do think there's an underestimation of the problem with alcoholism in this country as it is socially acceptable.
Yeah, the socially acceptable part is interesting because what I would do is go to these places that would be socially acceptable, and that would be my most moderate time of drinking because I knew that the people that are there, even now I wouldn't preach temperance to anyone. If you like to drink, go ahead and drink. My issue wasn't with the alcohol; it was the inability to stop drinking, and that was because I had other things going on, and so it wasn't about having a drink socially. It was about it was about escaping, and so when I would go to happy hours, it had to be professional. I would have a different type of drink. I would drink something that I don't fully enjoy, so I know I could sip on it, so I could be socially acceptable. And then as soon as the people that might frown upon more heavy drinking are gone, that's when you dial it up. So the happy hour was just kind of a pre-fade for me typically.
And it's so common and so pervasive in society. That's not a unique story, Raj. It's that's the thing, right? And yeah.
So in response to the whole legalizing drugs versus what we went through with prohibition and alcohol now being legal. Out of curiosity, I looked at the stats on alcohol addiction versus drug addiction, whereas alcohol being socially acceptable impacts, according to the WHO globally, 400 million adults, whereas drug addiction impacts between 60 and 70 million. So do you think that legalizing drugs would increase that stat?
Well, again, you'd have to look at places that have taken this approach, and one such instance would be Portugal, where long-term drug use has declined. Would that happen here? Probably not. I think that we would fuck it up. We'd find a way. I think a more applicable study would be what happened in Portland, and we would probably screw it up because you can't just change the law, making it legal without doing the other things that Portugal did that allowed sobriety to be a choice that people opted for. And I think, in fact, what happened is when Portland legalized it, you just saw people from different parts of the country, and specifically different parts of the Pacific Northwest, move to Portland so they can feed their addiction. So I do think that you'd have to be careful in this approach. And I would love to see solutions that would lead to a decrease in use. Singapore's figured that out, but I don't think any of us would be too comfortable with the types of laws that Singapore has put in place. I don't think anybody here would want to subject themselves to random drug testing the way that Singapore does. And so we talk about how we want to solve this issue, but we'd be comfortable doing the things that other places have done that have led to a dramatic reduction, almost completely eradicating these types of issues.
Can I ask a question? I said it before, but logically here, who thinks that a two-pronged approach attack to go exterior or interior? I think just going interior, to me, is the smarter, logical approach to the war on drugs. Who here thinks a multi-pronged attack, going internationally, engage in military and violent confrontations, possibly killing thousands of civilians in the process? Who here thinks that a multi-pronged approach is a better solution? Thank you. I'm complete.
I don't prefer a multi-pronged approach, but I'll go the other side and say external. So I think if you're in Washington and you're looking down the barrel, you're sticking your tax dollars in a cartridge, and you're looking at targets, can I kill maybe 500 people who are involved in a terrorist drug products, or can I get between the civilians within my country and the 6 feet around them and change their lives with the tax dollars? Which one can I provide more influence to? Can I get between my neighbor and their coping mechanism, or can I interrupt temporarily? Fully understand it. Temporarily, some of the trafficking operations, whether they be drugs or people or other things that are harmful and are a threat to our democracy.
But do we live in a democracy, or is it a representative republic? And is it a Republican form of government?
The latter.
Doesn't the Constitution say we should have a Republican form of government? What does that mean in the Constitution?
Here's the thing, though. I don't think that America will ever win this war on drugs, the so-called war on drugs, because there's always going to be a demand and supply. Even if you killed every cartel leader known currently, I believe there are new cartel leaders being, shape-shifted and molded and ready for tomorrow, right? I think drugs is too profitable. Our government, for certain politicians, I think there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of drug money, people's corruption, and I'm not sure that our government is ready to
very strict drug laws out there. But bringing it in as a drug trafficker, that's a very serious enough that we can impose things that we should be wanting to elevate. We've already been trafficking into the country, and hope everybody is against that. We don't want, illegal substances, any kind. We don't want people smuggling in illegal firearms into our country. That's a huge issue. We don't want that to go on. We don't want, people smuggling in foods that may kill us, may damage us, may give us diseases, may destroy crops. We already have a problem with that in several areas. We have invasive species because of our lax regulations in some of these areas. I like the multi-pronged approach. I don't think we've lost the war on drugs because I don't know how bad it would have gotten. As somebody who grew up around the 80s and 90s, I don't know how bad that would have actually turned out. I don't know if not having some kind of constraint on that, if that would have elevated and spread across the country in more ways than one. Or if everybody would have this utopian view of everybody's getting along, it would be fantastic. I really don't know. I don't have the answer for that. But I would say going after a lot of the producers in Colombia, maybe they could turn it into a legal business. Maybe they could have a joint venture to ensure that their product is safe and they could build an economy off of that. And if you want to make it legal for cocaine, it's just cocaine and it's been through the maker and it's got checks and balances on it and we can ensure that there's no fentanyl and that killing it. Maybe it would help us. Maybe that's a better avenue to go. We don't have to necessarily blow up everybody. But I think right now, with what we have with the cartels and the militant and military mindset that they have in terms of this, you're not going to break them because they'll come after anybody else. You have to actually break them in order to pursue your domestic policy because they will still try to find a way to work around it. They've been successful. The U.S. used the banks in Florida during the cocaine epidemic to basically boost the U.S. economy. There's more banks that were popping up in Florida than any other point in our country's history, and some of them are still around today, and they're all cocaine banks. So, you can handle all the things you want domestically, but you have to break that terrorist approach, and you have to patrol your borders. You're going to have to really step up, because otherwise, all the domestic policies are going to be shit unless you have a strong enforcement on the policies you actually care about and you're willing to commit action. So target and politicians really were to say, hey, let's get rid of the cartels. We don't need them south of the border. We can have that done within a couple months. That's not that long. It's not forevermore. And we can definitely wipe out a lot. Most of them are fighting amongst themselves right now because they're falling apart. But if we could keep the head off of that snake and not let them coalesce, it'll make short work of what we have right now. It's not that difficult to perceive.
Hey, John, you asked a good question. If I was king, how would I allocate the resources? And this is basically you're asking, should we the internal means fix the demand side and external means fix the supply side? And if I was king, I would say 70-30 on the demand side and very careful management of the resources of what that 70% is. To just say, I'm going to spend a lot of money on mental health is not a specific management of the addiction problem and the drug problem. I would say that a substantial part of that 70% must be carefully targeted within the mental health allocation of resources to specifically address addiction related to alcohol and drugs, and how best to prevent it in the first place through good mental health practices like helping with depression and so forth, and then not squandering all those resources, scarce resources, for other areas of mental health that should, I'm not saying ignore them, but I'm saying the money that we devote to mental health should be specifically addressed to the amount of money dealing with addiction to drugs and alcohol.
But what is mental health but education? If you're so stupid to go to Costco and Walmart and buy giant jugs of vodka and drink them every single night in your 60s, I mean, is that the smartest thing to do for your health? You know, this is not an economic dilemma, in my opinion. You can't look at supply side and demand percentages. To me, I think you have to look at it from the opinion that there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. You know, it's
Far few people. Mojo evidently fought his way through his issue. I have been unable. I was unable to do that, and it was more than just thinking on my part, which ultimately became thinking. And I'm a fairly intelligent guy, but my thinking was stinking. It was stinking. Therefore, I needed external help. Fortunately, I've availed myself of that, and it's helped me dramatically. So it's not just thinking your way individually through the solution. It is a mental health effort to teach people how to deal with the subject as the demons swirl around in their head. And just thinking about how to calm those demons down is nigh impossible for many addicts.
Well, I'm just saying temperance and abstinence, are rooted in source information. I'm just saying I read a lot of books and I have AA books and they are so wise and beneficial, but reading it versus talking about it, I'm just saying from a public policy standpoint and a spending standpoint, to continue to borrow and spend to fund change overseas with regards to imports is a waste of our treasury. We have to be very careful how we spend the assets of the treasury. And Doge has eliminated almost $1 trillion now of woke spending education contracts. So we waste our money, and now we want to spend more money.
I want to try to stay on topic. Thank you.
I'm just saying to fight international drug cartels costs money, and the only way to get that money is to borrow it. And then you spend it. So unless you're all prepared to rubber stamp and sign your name on a piece of paper that says, I want to borrow $1.5 trillion to continue to fund the war on international narco-terrorists using our military and CIA with no supervision or transparency, you just write a blank check. There you go. Spend it.
Thank you, John. We've heard that before.
I have a question, and I never thought of it this way until I'm hearing these different opinions, but and I'm firmly in the camp that we don't use the military, but let's just say, as a thought experiment, we were going to use the military, and let's say we were going to take out the cartels, and let's say we were going to go and incinerate the opium fields and utilize the military in a way that destroys the ability to create a supply of drugs in the first place. We could do that. The problem that would then come from that is we're spending money to do it, right? We're probably not generating a lot of goodwill in doing that. An easier way, and maybe a more cost-effective way than sending troops, what if we just did what we do to farmers when we tell farmers that we don't want them to grow something? We give them a subsidy. And again, I'm not saying that this is an idea, but as a thought experiment, as an alternative to the federal government using troops to go kill these people, what if we just told the cartels, hey, how much money are you making off this stuff? Okay, what if we just paid you to not sell it? And then and then incentivize them, create an incentive structure for them to not sell drugs.
So borrow and spend to encourage them to obey our laws? So blackmail them.
So, we tried this in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s. We tried doing some of this stuff. What you're suggesting in Central America.
Bribe them.
The problem with just highlighting one of the significant problems is that the CIA and our United States government decided to become a player in amongst the drug trade. So we were, running guns and drugs and cash all around Central America and flying them back and forth. If the U.S. government was to say, hey, I'm going to take a policy, we do not need these criminal cartels here. The Mexican people don't. I'm going to get with the Mexican government and I'm going to say, hey, we can help you. These are going to be issues. We're going to do it with you or without you. With you, what we can do is, I'm not going to destroy your land. I just want the cartels eliminated. I want the power structures and the power vacuums gone. We're going to seize those funds because primarily they come from the U.S. We'll make sure that we have agreements with you, and then we can open up trade relations. I'll subsidize you as long as you promise to proactively ensure that we don't have the rise of cartels here. Help stabilize that country. Do some investments. You're going to have to go ahead and do it instead of those subsidies going to the coca fields, which would be massive anyway. Why not just sit there and say, hey, Mexico, let's start investing. Let's open up trades. Let's do this fair trade practice, and let's get this thing going and kick it off down the road. Now all of a sudden you have more benefits out of this than you would long term. The problem comes is when you allow the CIA to say, hey, we've got $1 billion in cash here that's literally being eaten by rats and it's floating in a barge. What do we do with this? And you park it offshore in a Cayman Island account. Now you've got major problems there. So if we were just to target that, hey, we're going to seize it. We're not going to get that money, and we're not going to fund you weapons. I won't conduct revolutions on there. I'm not going to give you other assets. We are just targeting the cartel leadership. The cartels will break, they'll run, and then the people can decide. I don't think a lot of people know what living with a cartel is like. But if you ever want to, there's a couple of documentaries on it. There's some great journalistic on there, particularly by National Geographic. They can tell you, and it's not fun for these people. So it should be a human rights campaign for all those screaming about human rights. This would be one of them. I'm surprised that you don't have people protesting, sitting in the street, like save these villages and towns, because they literally live under the oppression of the cartels, and their children are threatened, their women are raped. Like that stuff goes on for them. So I'm just confused as to why we want to spare the cartels.
There was a great documentary series, actually, Brad, Dirty Money. One of the episodes is exactly to your point you're talking about earlier with banks and laundering. It's actually called Cartel Bank, HSBC. And how they had been laundering money for the Mexican cartel for decades. And essentially, were never held accountable. Couldn't follow the money, just politics bailed them out. But the amount, there's the infamous scene now in Scarface, where they're literally, you see the bank president looking out his window, Tony Montana and his henchmen are bringing in like duffel bags, like a convoy of duffel bags stuffed with cash to be laundered. You're like, it's just a movie. Nope, it's real.
Well, Brad, what are you suggesting? That the U.S. military be the Knights of the Round Table and liberate these people from these oppressive drug lords that control them and manipulate and abuse them? Is that really our responsibility? I'm asking a question.
Don't lock the front door. I just hope it goes away. I'm more of the type of, I see the problem. It's been an ongoing problem. Why don't I just go out and kill the wolf? And then I don't have to run and hide from the wolf.
You're saying there's one wolf? There's a lot of wolves in this pack, right?
Doesn't matter. All I have to do is just keep hitting the head, and then anybody who wants to sit there and try to be the alpha, I can take him out. Our military, our men and women are really at that time. I will give our men and women. If you gave us no holds barred, and you said, hey, I need you to take out like the Sinaloa cartel, I need you to target them. I'm giving it to you. I swear to you, before the end of the week, you will see a massive pile of everybody associated with that cartel stacked high, and that'll break. And we can do that very easily. We could drop 3 Rangers in a country and destabilize an entire nation. And don't think we have it. You have to actually think about this. We could, without the political involvement, without the tit for tat, without the corruption, really truly being that virtue of saying, hey, this is a threat on our border. This is a threat to another nation. This is under attack. Their government is
Okay, the show's over. The mojo vibration has left the building.
Fighting themselves. And it's on our southern border. I say go out and let's kill the wolves.
Like it's not that hard. Let's sign up. I mean,
Right. So let's say you take care of the Mexican problem. That's the cartel, but I believe behind Mexico is China and it's India are the second and third largest importers of illegal drugs into this country. That's a little trickier logistics to handle.
But Moose, if I cut off the Mexican connection, we're just trying to have it. They're not going to do Canada. They're not going to send it to Mexico. And with Mexico jumping on board saying, hey, we've got an economy here, we're going to lock down our southern border. We're going to work with Guatemala. And I mean, we can actually start a reaction where we could actually do something good for a country. Maybe, who knows, until we fuck it all up. But right now, what the drug war was supposed to be was not a drugs for guns scheme, not Fast and Furious, not, Iran-Contra deals. It was supposed to be none of that. It was supposed to actually just say, hey, let's work at home. Let's figure out how our domestic problem is. And let's get these cartels to actually stop producing it. This is what a lot of us thought we were fighting. I'm just saying, let's actually do that job. Don't have me funnel cash in the Caymans. Don't let me see ships and so you can have your private yacht, Congressman. Let me sink it down to the bottom of the ocean, and we'll move on from there. And you may not like it. It may sound cruel. It may sound mean. You don't have to worry about it. There are plenty of men like me who will go do this and be able to sleep like a baby at night.
Let me inject some administrative. I see Mojo left, and I'm no geek, so I have no idea how to close the room, and I'm not going to close it, but I am going to leave myself. There are other mods here, and I really want to thank all of you for participating in this thing, and it was a great conversation, and as I said earlier, we made a couple of mini steps to reach some fundamental agreement across political lines that is almost amazing in today's clubhouse. So thanks a lot. I'm going to bow out and keep on.
Likewise, Anthony.
All right, take care.
Take care, Anthony.
But Brad, if you were in the Pentagon, the 5-star general, why do you think deploying soldiers and giving them those operations is an effective usage of their time? Because you're going to have a lot of casualties and people that die. Plus, there's a lot of women in the narcotics industry. So they're going to be killing a lot of women who are ride or die type hoes with AK-47s that are going to die. I mean, why stir the pot?
So first off, if one of these cartels they employ women or have ride or die women that are going to pick up an AK, I'm perfectly okay sending them to go meet whatever sky daddy they go by. I have no compunction. Man, woman, or child, it makes no difference to me. If you're harming an American, I will gladly and without purpose will do it. And there are plenty of men. Do I enjoy having to see a kid or woman get involved in combat? No. But at the same time, if you're going to pick up the weapon, I now consider you a fair player. It does fuck with the mind a little bit, but at the end of the day, I don't know. Which do you like better? Do you like these cartels smuggling over sex traffickers? Do you like them killing people? Do you like them murdering babies? Do you like them, having the weapon states that they have? Do you like them taking your cash? Do you like them bribing officials? Do you like them being terrorists? Do you? I don't know too many people who do. Oh, who the fuck made me a mod?
Anybody else take a moment and talk on it? I don't know the domestic answers to the drugs. Like that's I don't like them. But I don't think you should be locked up for using them. At the same time, I think if you're a dealer and you're targeting a playground or young kids, I have an issue with you there. I'd beat you in the head with a baseball bat. Not have problems with that. But I don't really particularly enjoy. I don't think we need to lock up all of these people. I agree with the Portugal system on that, but the decriminalization of the users, if we just took care of that
what do you think about, budget allocation and appropriations? I mean, are we even utilizing our national police force in every major city to do what they can really do to cut back on crime, illegal alien invasion, drug distribution? I mean, or are Democrat leaders in major you?
It's just a bunch of people.
I'm just asking a question. Oh, I can show you lots of examples of illegal Venezuelans who have murdered plenty of Americans since being released in this country since just died.
You aren't the same. Invasion implies an expanding army with weapons invading the country. That's different than what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying the word invasion for me. I'm just asking you, Brad. Do you think that the U.S. police force is really doing all they can do?
Police forces need to be restructured. Some of our courts. Again, police targeting users. Like, I really don't care if somebody's wanting to snort heroin or smoke heroin. I don't know if they smoke heroin, but I know. I don't really care. That just sounds like a whole lot of shit that I never wanted to know about. But if they're smoking more, it's right. Blood barriers here. So if they're smoking heroin. It's not my problem. Like, you have a choice. You're accountable for your own life. I don't need to send police. I don't need to direct. Now, do I need to direct the supplier that's, I don't know.
We're reaching out of the meeting that you
distributing it on the street. Yeah, I think that needs to get off the street. I think that needs to be targeted, and we can target those. But I think, honestly, screwing up the users, I don't know, like, I can't believe it because too many politicians.
Wasn't it wonderful that the 5 officers tackled one of their own shooter on base?
People got angry. I said, why does he have a beard? They said it's called shaving the chick.
And there's not going to be a hang up. This is the set action. And I think we can resolve a lot of these things. And I think a lot of these traffickers would run scared. I think the cartels would go back and try to get citizenship in China and be like, please take this in. Because Russia don't fuck around with them. They have drugs. They shoot the traffickers all the time. They don't care. They send them to the gulag. Have fun with that one. That's a whole cool person.
Well, I think from like a domestic manpower, just having the people physically able to do what's required, I don't even know if the manpower's there. And then plus, in many of these organizations, they spend a lot of time investigating their own. There's a lot of people that work in these agencies, whether it's Department of Homeland Security or ICE, etc. That maybe some of them are informants, to the dark side or the other side. So there's a lot of intelligence, and money in all of this. And thus, you have vice and criminal, people who are involved in conspiracies to distribute and profit and get away with doing this type of activity, at scale. But I'm just saying that, you have to be pragmatic in terms of what you have and what your budget is. And unfortunately, we have a lot of stuff that is just, we don't need to replace it. We either need to use it or clean it or make sure it's in good condition. But to be so frenetic, I'm just saying that to have any anxiety over the future.
Like what? Like, what's the example you have in your head?
I'm talking about assets in terms of military divisions, weapons, helicopters, jets, artillery, everything. And there's a lot of soldiers, tackling other soldiers or shooting at other soldiers, like at Fort Stewart. So I'm just saying, instead of letting, guys with beards shoot each other on an army base and then have 5 soldiers tackle a guy who doesn't even have a gun, or they don't even have guns. That's the one thing I can't understand is why on military bases are there so many disarmed people? Even the police at military entrances sometimes aren't even armed with ammunition. They just got, blanks in that gun, or there's no bullets in that rifle. So I'm just saying that if the United States wants to work its way out of the debt and the security crisis, I think you have to look at it from what is actually practical, pragmatic. What can you actually adjust? What levers can be pulled? I mean, in that way, Trump is like the super consciousness of this country. He has that ability to spend and pull and push. He's got a desk with buttons, and he's got an infinite number of buttons. But it just becomes a question of priorities. I think that Trump and Kennedy and his entire administration really understand that principle. I just think still at $2 trillion with a deficit, I mean, it's just going to get bigger. It's never going to stop. So I think just really determining what the best ROI is, the best bang for our buck is the way to go. And I think that they're doing it. Thank God Elon Musk installed Doge at every agency. And now even Doge Florida is a success. So forensic accounting, pragmatism, and common sense are winning the day. Oh, don't be such a negative Nancy, you Republican Marshall.
That's not being a negative Nancy. If you come in this department that wants to fund federal spending,
negative Nancy.
Then you should cut more federal spending than your budget is. Otherwise, you can't justify your existence.
You're just being a negative Nancy instead of a positive optimist.
No. If I'm getting somebody who tells me they're going to save me money, yet they cost me more money than they save me, they couldn't save me any fucking money.
They've saved $1 trillion in woke DEI education contracts, Marshall.
Which is exactly what Doge said.
No, Doge saved America $1 trillion in woke DEI climate change gender studies.
Only saves some money, not enough to justify its existence.
Wrong, Marshall. They saved almost $1 trillion already. Go to the Doge calculator.
Justify its existence. And Department of Government Efficiency can't reasonably justify its existence because it costs more to run than it saves.
These agencies don't. The only agency that raises revenue is called the IRS, Marshall. Every other agency does nothing but spend money on behalf of the American population.
I'm not saying the other agencies don't spend. I'm saying this agency, which was brought under the Trump administration, which people tend to reference, is not an agency that saved more money than it spent. It's an agency that failed in its mission. Don't be wrong.
Okay, I'm going to find out how much money the federal government has spent on Doge administrative expenses and compare that to how much they stripped in fraudulent contracts. Let me do the quick calculation. I need to see some numbers here, Marshall.
Trying to save money, but I know it's a fraud. It's going to cost more money to run that department and employees than it's saved for the United States government and taxpayers. It did not save.
Okay, I'm putting that into Grok. We're going to see what Grok says. We'll let Grok be impartial, as Grok is very impartial. I'm sure Grok will give us the correct answer.
As Elon Musk's AI is impartial, okay? We'll be serious. Elon Musk's AI is not impartial, but if it's an AI that spits out an answer, why not? Let's take it. Hey, you and
Yeah, Marshall, okay, I kind of want to challenge you on that. Now,
if I am wrong, please correct me.
okay, so it's actually more of a philosophical point that I want to get into, and it has to do with Doge. But, yeah, I mean, I'm going to give that to the Rams for asking this question. I think it's insane that they get so offended by it, but I actually see what is going on in the U.S. and what is going on in the UK, what's going on in Canada, and it's kind of like the end of liberalism. It's like the end of that ideology. It doesn't exist anymore. We're moving into a new era of belief systems. I don't know how to explain it. We don't know yet. We have not figured out what the fuck is going on. But what I see going on in the UK, because I live here, is literally, it's day 13 in a row where an underage child has been sexually massive migration issue, right? Now, in the U.S., you guys solved it. You've dealt with all of that. You also had Doge. You have tried to government efficiency. In Canada, I mean, you just have like an absolute shit show of a situation. So my question to you is that what I'm seeing is this is the actual end of liberalism, and we're entering into a new era. Do you agree with me, or do you completely disagree?
Oh, I'll agree that we seem to be on the cusp of something a little different. The end of liberalism, not so sure. The end of people believing that institutions are going to solve all their problems and that they don't have to pay attention to life. I think that's probably the thing that's the end of. Probably not having to pay attention to what's going on in your life. I think now more than ever, you actually do have to pay attention.
Are you projecting?
In the UK, it's like people are paying attention. It's like everybody is like talking about what's going on in the UK with like fucking migrant crisis. Like it's like literally it surrounds me day by day. I don't even want to talk about it, and I have people here talking about it. So it's like that is an issue. But then the UK, the US.
Wait, Ewan, before you continue, hold on one sec. Let me just answer Marshall's claim. Okay, this is from Grok. John Kitover asked, the Treasury has apportioned $39 million to fund Doge as of February 2025. That's $39 million in funding. That's the Treasury's payment that they have spent on Doge operations. Doge claims that they have saved $199 billion in cuts as of July 2025. But analysis from CBS and others show actual savings of less than 3% claim, with overall federal spending rising. All right, well, you're repeating the CBS narrative, Marshall. There's a Doge calculator. You can look at the Doge X account and see all the contracts, the screenshots from the acquisition system, SAP, that they use.
Yeah, there is a good point. If you want to prove me wrong or say that my assumption, because that's what it was, is incorrect. Okay, so if they're claiming, what's the evidence that they actually saved that much money?
The receipts on the Doge X account, they have a calculator. The other side, CBS, the other side says CBS has no source when they say less than 3%.
Marshall, I'm not gonna lie, like we even saw a difference in like activism in the UK when Doge like muddled funding. It's very bizarre shit. I think that it's gonna take probably a decade for us to like fully understand.
Okay, this is the end of the show. Okay, everybody go to johnforcongress.com. Thanks for joining. If you want to join the campaign, text 312-498-0517. We want to jump in one more clown house.
Make it like Zionism. You just might not be calling it that.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I'm opposing. I'm simply saying, like, there should be a state. I mean, like, there should be a state of Israel just simply rejecting the Jew part. In principle, I oppose the fact that there's a Jewish state or there's a white state or an Italian state. I don't.
And try to put the enemy shit in the street.
Exactly. Please confirm or deny that.
Wait, I didn't catch that. We need to know that. Lion said, don't lie on my friend. Lion said, if he lies, preach you.
Okay, hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Go to johnforcongress.com. That's the Mojo experience.